This podcast is brought to you by the Dunfield Retirement Residence, a casually elegant retirement community located at Yonge and Eglinton in the heart of Midtown Toronto. Customized living options complement your independent, active lifestyle. Learn more at thedunfield.com.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ellin Bessner, and this is what Jewish Canada sounds like for Tuesday, November 28th, 2023. Welcome to the CJN Daily, a podcast of the Canadian Jewish News sponsored by Metropia. Did you know I've said this opening greeting to you now every week, 4 times a week for the past 2.5 years? That's 471 episodes, including today's of the CJN Daily, since we launched for you in May of 2021. I'm so grateful that a lot of you are listening to the podcast, and not just in Canada, but in the US, in Israel, even in Norway, and around the world. We just surpassed 800,000 downloads. We hope to reach 1 million in the new year. And I'm sure it won't come as a surprise that when Israel is threatened, as it has been since October 7th, our reach has increased. We're seeing more and more people tuning to the CJN Daily and to the main CJN website for authoritative, balanced, accurate, and trustworthy stories about Israel and Hamas, about the hostages, about Canadians caught up in the crisis, or those helping by taking up arms or by volunteering. We've done stories about the victims and how the community is rallying and fundraising, and about scary spiking antisemitism, how it's being felt here at home, including by students on campus, by faculty, as Jewish community centers are being defaced or worse with gunshots through doors, hateful speech at pro-Palestinian rallies, and even we've done stories about how mental health experts are trying to get us through these anxious times. Which is why today, which is Giving Tuesday, I want to speak to you from the heart about what the CJN means to me and why I need your help and your financial support to help me and the Daily team keep on producing our important stories. Stories that matter to you and to the wider Jewish community, stories that you won't find anywhere else. As many of you know, I was off on leave for a few months over the summer, and I was slowly working back up to produce a couple of episodes a week. But that was before October 7th happened, and I knew then that this was the CJN Daily's moment to serve our community, the time when we're most needed. I felt that this was my way to contribute with the tools I have, my microphone and my 40-plus years of journalism experience, and my passion and my commitment to bring you Canadian and Jewish perspectives on what's happening in Israel, in Canada, and around the world right now at this crucial moment in our people's history. Whether you've started to follow us on the CJN Daily from day one, or you've just discovered us recently, you'll have heard me say this is what Jewish Canada sounds like, because unlike other daily news shows like the New York Times Daily or The Big Story, where they interview journalists who are working on the stories, I felt from the outset that the mission of the CJN Daily was to hear from the Canadian Jewish newsmakers themselves, from their mouths, about stories that matter to Canadian Jews, no matter whether you're listening at home or in Israel or in Florida or Arizona in the winter. Now, don't get me wrong. The CJN has actually been doing this in print form since the paper was founded before I was born back in January of 1960, founded by Dorothy and Joseph Neuberger. And from covering the Six-Day War to freeing Soviet Jewry to Entebbe to Munich to the first Jewish woman appointed to the Supreme Court of Canada, Rosalie Abella, and everything in between, that's what the CJN's been doing. And before the pandemic hit in 2020, the CJN did have a couple of podcasts already on the go, the Canadian Jewish Schmooze and Menschwarmers. But fast forward to April 2020. The world was in lockdown because of the COVID pandemic. The CJN's offices were shuttered. All in-person events had either been canceled or pivoted to Zoom. CEO Yoni Goldstein decided he couldn't just let Jewish Canada continue through the pandemic without a unifying voice, without a community place where Canadian Jews could get their news and express a uniquely Canadian Jewish viewpoint on issues. So Yoni assembled a small team, and the pandemic CJN crew decided to go digital only on Facebook first, and then they decided to have a crew of podcasters to move the venerable and award-winning news platform into the booming world of on-demand audio. So where do I fit in? Well, I've been a journalist literally since I was 10 years old, although I didn't know it at the time, because I used to watch my parents' friends come over and play cards, and I would make notes about them, just like Harriet the Spy, the main character of a popular book when I was growing up. It was also a film series later on. Growing up, I was very active in the Montreal Jewish community, following in my parents' footsteps. And when I went to university to study journalism at Carleton University, I always thought I would go into law. I mean, we had like 12 lawyers and judges in the family, and my grandfather was the first Jewish judge appointed to the Ontario Supreme Court. And my grandmother being a pioneering graduate of law school in the 20s, but women couldn't practice law in Ontario back then. So I thought law was my destiny, but I could not stand my calculus teacher at university, and so that lowered my marks on my finals. It hurt my application to law school, and I didn't get accepted anywhere in law school. But the news business was actually where I fit in best anyway. I'd worked on the campus paper and the radio station because I always loved telling stories about other people's lives and hearing them tell it themselves. I was lucky to have enjoyed a globe-trotting journalism career for CBC and CTV and the Globe and Mail, and I worked overseas for 6 years as a freelance foreign correspondent based in Italy. I covered the Vatican, I covered several wars in Africa, I even covered Italian soccer. In 2018, my book Double Threat was published, which tells a story of 17,000 Canadians of Jewish faith who served in the Second World War. And that's where my professional life coincided with the CJN. I started working as a freelancer for them every so often, doing stories about military heroes. And I did this while I was teaching journalism for 20 years at Centennial College and other post-secondary places in Toronto. And I was teaching podcasting too. And so that brings me full circle. We were all teaching from our dining room tables through Zoom, and the CJN CEO and their team of executive producer Michael Freeman and managing editor Mark Weisblatt approached me by email to ask if I would come on board and start a daily news podcast for the CJN. I danced around the kitchen and I read the email and I said, hell yeah. And I decided it was the perfect time to leave academia and go back to my first love, which is daily news, telling stories that I find fascinating about Jewish topics that matter to me. Because when I was working at the CBC and elsewhere, I had to keep my personal opinions out of my work. You know, keep your cards pretty close to the chest. Don't wear your religion or your faith or your culture on your sleeve. Being Jewish just wasn't a topic you need to advertise. The CJN gave me the chance to do that. And the CJN Daily was born. We wanted it to be a sort of audio central square where we could provide daily Jewish news stories in a short form that you could download in the safety of your house and listen on Alexa or your phone when you were walking the dog or cooking, because that was basically the only safe thing you could do during COVID's lockdown 2.5 years ago. So I left my teaching career. I left behind a 6-figure salary with benefits, and I eagerly went to work at the CJN for nearly no money because I believed in the CJN and their mission of reflecting the Jewish community back to themselves and telling Jewish stories. It had been my dream. The CJN found a sponsor for our show, Metropia, and so in the weeks and months leading up to May of 2021, we worked feverishly to be ready for May 1st, which was Jewish Heritage Month, and then news things never go smoothly. In the news business, you have to be ready to pivot. And in fact, you might recall the weekend in May where many people in Israel were killed in 2021 in a stampede during Lag BaOmer on Mount Meron. We had already done an episode with Senator Linda Frum and former MP Michael Levitt, but we threw the story out and we found an expert about Mount Meron's festivities and about Israel's security problems there, and we went live, and that was our first episode, May 3rd, 2021. Okay, the audio was not perfect. Well, actually, it was pretty terrible, but we got the episode up. We introduced ourselves to the world on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and through email and on social media. And when I say we, and I'm talking about the CJN Daily, I mean, there are only two of us. Me, the creator, writer, interviewer, researcher, and editor, and the CJN Daily's producer, Zachary Kaufman, who you've heard on the show more frequently this past summer. Zach crafts the sound you hear. He directs the framing of interviews. He shapes what Jewish Canada sounds like, really. He does research, and he definitely adds clarity and stylish prose to my scripts. And he's a crackerjack documentary producer in his own right. And that is our total small but mighty team of two. And I'm telling you this because big podcast shows like CBC's Front Burner have a huge staff. Maybe 30 people work on them. And yet we pump out 4, sometimes 5 episodes a week, 20 minutes each. That's nearly 10,000 hours of listening. We owe a huge thank you to our sponsor, Metropia. They're a real estate and housing development company with CEO Howard Sokolowski. Fun fact, the integrity, community, quality, and customer care tagline that I always say at the end comes from Metropia's mission statement. And we do all this work at the Daily with the support of Michael Freeman, our executive producer, who tweaks the episode headlines and he fact-checks my intro text and usually rewrites it to make it more catchy. And Mark Weisblatt, our managing editor, who makes sure the podcast stories reach you by email, through our social media channels, and on the CJN's front page. In 2.5 years, we have grown steadily. Our podcast is as busy as ever. We just had our best month on record since the October 7th war, as people are turning to us for unique takes on the news. We've been working flat out. In fact, the CJN's published over 100 stories about the war. And our podcasts and stories are monitored by Canadian political leaders and Jewish community leaders and the media who've quoted what we produce. It's been my privilege and my honor to do this show for you all this time. And it's been a privilege and honor now more than ever to continue to do it. With the future of the State of Israel up in the air, the safety of Jews worldwide front and center, and with no clear path forward towards a lasting peace, both in Israel and for Jews here in the diaspora. So, won't you support our work? As you know, for decades, the CJN used to rely on subscriptions and from selling ads, and that pretty much dried up before COVID. And like many startup independent journalism publishers, we had to pivot to find new ways to sustain the CJN business and pay the 15 staff members. So the CJN pursued a new model, one that is supporter-based. We applied to the government for the CJN to become a registered journalism organization with the Canada Revenue Agency. And we were approved. So instead of subscribers, we now consider you our donors. And you can get charitable receipts for any donation. Consider donating $100 a year. That's $8 a month. And for that, you'll get content that matters to the diverse community of Jews in Canada, Israel, and around the world. And you'll get our glossy magazine 4 times a year and insider live events. Only donors get the quarterly magazine. In fact, the Hanukkah edition is now at the printers and it should be coming out shortly. New donors will get the next year's edition when it's out in 2024. On this Giving Tuesday, for those of you who already support us by donating, please accept my sincerest thanks. And for you listeners who want to keep us working for the duration of the conflict and beyond, please click on the link in our show notes and donate what you can. Consider it your act of generosity to be a part of what Jewish Canada sounds like. Go to thecjn.ca/donate. Also, we want to grow our show with your help. In the coming year, I'd like to take the CJN Daily on a cross-Canada tour so I can get out and speak to people in the regions where you live, not just by Zoom. And I'd like to tape interviews with you. So if you want to book us, let me know. We also need your financial help because we want to hire somebody to edit all the great video from our interviews and put it on our YouTube channel. And so with your financial help, we can do this and we can do some meetups with listeners, all in 2024. As always, we love hearing from you. Are we doing stories that interest you? What should we cover? What do we miss? And whose voices are not on that should be? You can email me with any questions about donating. If you already gave, please let me know by email. And please tell a friend why you like the CJN Daily and why they should try us out. I am at ebessner@thecjn.ca. Thanks for listening to this Giving Tuesday edition of the CJN Daily.
The Dunfield Retirement Residence offers customized living options to complement your independent, active lifestyle. Welcome home. Welcome to the Dunfield. Visit us at thedunfield.com to book a personal tour.